All right, we are live. It is Friday, August 15th, 2025, in the world Trump built. I am David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect. This is the Prospect Weekly Roundup. We do this every Friday at 12:30 Eastern. With me today is Harold Meyerson, our editor at large. Harold, how are you?
I am fine, which cannot be said for the city I inhabit, which is Washington, D.C.
Right. Now, we had you on, we're going to have you on for two reasons today. One, to talk about the situation in your native land, your home birthplace of California, but
Right.
also to talk about the situation, and we'll lead with this, in your adopted home, your current home of Washington, D.C., where starting on Monday, the President of the United States has taken over the police force and deployed National Guard troops, although I'm not sure they've actually been physically deployed, and as well as ICE agents, and changing some of the rules that DC had around sanctuary city status. So I want to start with this. You're in DC, you live near some of the areas where there have been police presence. And I'm just curious, what is it like at this point there?
Well, the Washington Post put up a map on their website this morning of where different agencies had been deployed. Here is ICE, here is DEA, etc. And I noticed they put a mark right where I live, and it said mixed, which means essentially everybody who Trump wants to
You got
deploy
everybody.
is around here. So there are at any given moment supposedly 200 National Guards around the city, but A, that's not a very big presence, and B, they're not armed or really doing anything. I mean, it's sort of like they're doing even less than the National Guard did in Los Angeles, about which you wrote, in which they were sort of standing around the federal building,
Right.
uh, and uh, when they were standing around the federal building. Here, the escalation has taken really two forms. One is that there are more non-National Guard, non-DC police presence around. There's a lot of, in particular, ICE agents. This is becoming kind of a backdoor way of escalating the detentions and deportations of undocumented immigrants here in DC. Uh, and then there is a takeover of the police department, and this escalated in the last 24 hours. Uh, the police had agreed to do a partial cooperation with the feds on issues of undocumented. They would be available for transportation, that sort of thing. Attorney General Pam Bondi said that wasn't sufficient last night, and she ordered full cooperation with ICE, which is completely against DC, the policy that DC city government had long ago set and adhered to, and that she was effectively suspending the DC police chief and substituting Terry Cole, who was head of uh, state
The
of
Drug
Virginia.
Enforcement Agency, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, and putting him in charge. And so earlier today, uh, DC's own autonomous attorney general, and plus with backing from DC Mayor Muriel Bowser, uh, filed suit saying that it was a violation of the Home Rule Act for them to substitute personnel. So
Mhm.
that will be heard in a DC court, that motion at 2 p.m. Eastern, which is about 90 minutes from now. But for the moment, really the whole issue of federalizing the police force, and even more operationally, who actually runs the police force,
Right.
is up in the air.
Now, the leadership, that's what's really being at issue in this case. My understanding is that the federalization is allowable under the Home Rule Act for 30 days, and if it wants to be, if that is desired to be extended, that Congress would have to affirmatively pass a law to allow that. Now, Trump has been out there saying if they don't pass a law, I can call an emergency. And this is obviously the danger of these emergency powers that can be sort of twisted to do just about anything. I mean, in parallel with the legal case that you're talking about here, there is a legal case that's been happening in San Francisco. There was a 3-day trial about the deployment of National Guard troops without California's consent to Los Angeles. Now, it's true they didn't do anything, but the idea was that this lawsuit was saying that there is no standard by which the president can just commandeer the California National Guard. And I see that and what might happen after the 30-day limitation in DC as of a piece of the increasing military presence on American streets, and particularly in big American cities.
Right. And Trump has made noises suggesting that if he can't get an extension beyond those 30 days, and that would require 60 votes in the Senate, and he's not going to get
Right,
60 votes in the Senate,
right,
that he could declare a national emergency, which means, I presume, he could deploy troops anywhere and everywhere.
right.
The
Which is what he
immediate,
wants, right? I mean,
yeah.
I think that's an end goal, and he's been kind of pushing the levers, like pressing for this here and there.
Right, right. And this, as is now the case in DC, this also coincides with compelling police forces to cooperate with ICE and thereby increase the number of detentions and
Right. We
deportation.
actually had a story about that this week from James Barata. And the early verdict is that Trump has been losing a lot of those sanctuary cities cases, unable to force cities to cooperate with ICE without a 287G agreement that they affirm, unable to punish these cities for not cooperating with ICE since that violates longstanding 10th Amendment principles. But it seems like, DC, he has the opportunity to just sort of commandeer the city policing infrastructure, and just change that policy. Number one, and number two, the sort of end goal is to intimidate these cities. There's an example of Louisville changing its policy on sanctuary cities because of the pressure, even if that pressure would not amount to an actual cutting off of funds or what have you.
Right. Well, of course, DC is the low-hanging fruit in terms of the
Sure.
any federal attempt to really seize control of cities, because DC has never had full control of its city. And I mean, it's particularly tempting to Trump because he knows virtually everyone in DC, to use a technical legal phrase, hates his guts. Kamala Harris got 90% of the vote in
Right.
2024 in DC. Donald Trump got 7% of the vote.
Right.
So, this is striking out at his enemies, which is actually his seems to be the fundamental purpose of his presidency.
Sure.
Uh, and that requires, from his point of view, that requires declaring an emergency. Of course, whether any neutral observer would see an emergency situation or not. And what he's been doing in DC, and this gets back to your initial question about my neighborhood.
Yeah.
DC is not like LA with a cluster, heavy clusters of undocumented immigrants. There's no garment district here, as there is in Los Angeles. The Home Depots are mainly in the suburbs outside DC city limits.
Right.
So they have been doing kind of uh, hit and miss patrolling. They've a couple nights ago, they had a display of force on 14th Street Northwest, which is quite near. I live between 17th and 18th Streets Northwest.
Is this where the sandwich guy was?
Yeah, this was where this. Well, that was even earlier in the week. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, they were doing kind of dragnets, checking on in cars. Uh, on the very slim pretext of, well, maybe they weren't observing the seatbelt regulation, and that
Uh-huh.
enables them to.
Wouldn't that include the senator from Oklahoma who said
It would, yes,
he doesn't
as
have his seatbelt on in case
that's
there's a
right.
carjacking, he has to make a quick escape?
That's right. Yes. What's his name? Marky Wayne Mullen has said
Mark
that.
Wayne Mullen, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Tough guy, real
the thing
tough guy.
about the other distinction between LA and DC here is the streets on which they're doing this in DC are have heavy pedestrian traffic. 14th Street is a mecca of restaurants and stores which have cross-class, cross-racial clientele. And it outrages, the DC residents appropriately so. We know one has hurled a sandwich, and for all we know, there are other DC residents walking around with sandwiches in their grasp.
And they need to be checked for
A clear
sandwiches.
and present danger. Yes, yes. But
100%.
yeah, but I
But
mean, under the theory that they're, targeting, violent felons, when you do this in a just stopping cars, that kind of shows just quite how far they are from targeting felons. And there was a little notice in the Washington Post today that a number of the folks that they have detained were working for food delivery services, that sort of thing.
mhm,
So,
that's
and
interesting.
that's food.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
in an urban environment, there's a higher chance of when you don't have Home Depots, when you don't have other places that ICE has been traditionally targeting, food delivery workers might be the way. But I think we've left a couple things unsaid here that we should elaborate on. And the first is just the nature of crime in the District of Columbia generally in two phases, that I want you to talk about. One, just sort of the overall trends on crime in DC, and number two, where those crimes are typically perpetrated relative to where these deployments are happening. And there's a real disconnect between where these new federal or federalized forces are putting their efforts in, like the mall and tourist areas, relative to where crime might happen in DC.
yeah, a lot of the deployments have been on the, particularly of National Guard, have been on the mall, have been outside museums. Unless
So
unless they're
tourist areas, not
yeah.
areas of high crime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unless they're targeting art critics who don't like what's being displayed in museums, it's not clear to me what exactly that accomplishes. And then as to the overall crime trends in DC, last year saw the lowest level of violent crimes in DC for the past 30 years, and this year, at the rate of crimes committed in the first half of the year shows that it's lower than last year's 30-year low. So it's
Right.
very, very hard to make a claim that DC is experiencing an emergency. Yes, DC does have violent crime like every other American city, and like rural America, where every index I've seen has shown that violent crime continues to rise, not fall, which has been the case in virtually every major American city.
And yet, one feature of DC, particularly in the last 6 months, is that unlike many American cities, you have semi-permanent residents who come from all parts of the country, literally every district in the country, and spend time there and have very preconceived notions about what cities are that may not orient with the reality. And I'm talking, of course, about members of Congress
Right.
and maybe their staffs. Uh, and Ryan Cooper had a very good piece that's on the site today that you edited that was about this irrational fear. We referenced it a little bit with Mark Wayne Mullen talking about how he doesn't buckle a seatbelt because he's worried
Right.
about
Right.
having to escape from a carjack. This irrational fear that Republicans have at odds with the evidence about crime in general in cities, and what the sort of ulterior motives are for that. So, what do you think about that?
Well, to begin with, I mean, Congress is made up of Democrats and Republicans, and in the House, Democrats overwhelmingly, not overwhelmingly, but substantially come from metropolitan areas, from urban districts.
Right.
So DC demographically, et cetera, is not an alien culture to them. On the other hand, Republicans disproportionately come from rural districts or ex-urban districts. If there is an inner city Republican out of the 435 members of the House, I don't know who that would be. I don't know if there are any. I doubt it.
Not at the moment. I mean, there
Yeah.
have been in the past, but
Well, of
not at the
course,
moment.
but we weren't in this political
Right.
impasse that we are in right now. So, this forms a kind of alien culture to the Marjorie Taylor Greens who come from a rural part of Georgia and so on. And you know, it's very very alien to them. I would also add, keep in mind in DC that, every country that has diplomatic relations with the United States, a great number of them being African and Asian and Latin American, that's the majority of them, are also here and have staffs. And so even more does that give a kind of alien flavor to
Right. You
someone
walk
who
down
comes
Embassy Row
from
or whatnot.
Marjorie Taylor Greene's district or similar districts.
I would also say that that split that you talk about, and I've thought of a couple big cities that are probably have Republican members, like Oklahoma City, for example,
Well,
because
even Oklahoma
and then
City recently had a Democrat. I mean, it doesn't
recently,
now.
but now
Yeah,
it doesn't
right,
now. And there are, I mean, and we're going to get to this when we talk about gerrymandering, but a lot of cities are cracked in the parlance of
right,
cartography, in that
right.
a portion of the actual city is represented by a Republican because also the outlying areas, which are very red, are put into that mix. So we do have that. But my larger point is this divide that you're talking about, this urban rural divide, in many ways explains why there is this rush to depict these cities as havens of crime and require federal intervention there too. I think that there is a real desire to demonize what these cities are, to make them seem much more foreign and alien than they actually are, and thereby to starve them of funding, to punish them in one way or another as a political matter, as a partisan
Exactly.
political matter, not just as a crime reduction matter.
Right. No, the main sin of a major American cities in the real calculations of the Trump universe is that they're capital D Democratic.
Right.
That is what they want to crack down on and deprive those cities of whatever power they normally exercise. And they're going all out right now in DC, which again is in a unique situation, but they're trying to expand it elsewhere as well.
It's going to be interesting to see if there is backlash. There is a special election coming up in Tennessee, which is one of these examples of a cracked
Right. Right.
This guy Mark Green, he left, he resigned, and there's a special election for his seat, and a lot of that district is Nashville. And Nashville obviously doesn't have exactly the same flavor of Washington, Los Angeles, New York, but it is pretty cosmopolitan. I've been to Nashville, and and to the extent that Democrats the Democratic Party in Tennessee sees an opportunity to say these Republicans are out there. They're going to come to Nashville next. This is what's next for your city, unless you fight back and vote against Republicans and tell them that they have negative political dividends from this. I think there is a way, and it's not. We don't see, I think, enough on the Democratic side of the fence of the defense of cities, not just using crime statistics, but saying that these are actually places that are desirable to live, that they create most of the jobs in the country, and that these are models for the sort of American ideals, particularly around the melting pot. It's part and parcel with the lack of defense of immigration in and of itself that we sometimes see from the Democratic Party.
It is. And of course, the Republicans are moving away from embracing the whole melting pot ideology. I mean, J.D. Vance is more or less,
Yeah,
hailed.
they're nationalists.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And there's, God knows, a long-standing
And in
tradition.
the absence of any pushback to that, that's where we're going to head. I think that this episode, and you see it in the streets. I mean, we talked about the sandwich guy, but that's just one of many sort of minor rebellions that we see. And my understanding is every time I shows up in one of these places in DC, and certainly this is true in California, they are just berated. There's a strong grassroots kind of at an individual level, a revulsion of this kind of setting on U.S. soil of a military presence, which has been there since before the founding of the country, right? I
Well,
mean,
I
it's
mean,
one of the primary
this
points in the
read
Declaration of Independence.
if you read the Declaration of Independence, the stationing of British troops in and
Right.
around Boston was, the flashpoint of the revolution. And when they deployed out to Lexington and Concord, we know what happened. So yeah, this is a very deep American tradition, as is welcoming immigrants. And where the Trump administration has gone all out in LA and DC, the two cities that have defined my life,
Right.
they get huge pushback. And I don't doubt that if they try this in the Bay Area, in Chicago, in New York, in Boston, they're going to continue to get huge pushback.
Yeah, I think there is a correlation here, or will be, between national polling and these, uh, uh, incidences of federal takeovers or federal deployments in U.S. cities. I don't think that the normal American, the average American, likes to see this. I mean, even on sort of the surfacey, kind of superficial level, it smacks of disorder, and Trump is the president, right? And so, I think it'll be interesting to see moving forward how this affects Trump politically.
Well, talking of smacking of disorder, one of the major immigrant advocate organization in Maryland, CASA, has said, in light of what Pam Bondi declared last night about ordering the DC cops to
Hmm.
fully cooperate with ICE, that immigrants should be very wary of contacting the police henceforth. And so, this is really a spur to urban
Right.
disorder, as is the fact that the leadership of the DC cops is now unclear. So,
And this has long been stated as the main reason
yeah,
for sanctuary cities to adopt that status is that it is bad for crime prevention generally to make a segment of the population, in some cases a large segment of the population, afraid to go to the cops.
And that is why the LA police in 1979 adopted
Yeah.
Special Order 40, which, for that very reason, forbade the LA cops from abetting immigration enforcement. So this is a long-standing urban policy rooted in trying to lower the rate of crime. It wasn't controversial until demagogues like Trump made it controversial.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so that's sort of the DC story. Unless you have anything else
Well,
there
that's
that you wanted
enough,
to get
but
in.
we
Yeah.
will see what happens at 2 p.m. when the city's suit against the uh, federalization of the cops and the displacement of the police chief is heard in court here.
Okay. I want to move to a couple things happening on the other side of the country where I am in California. Yesterday, I was at the announcement, a little bit oddly put in Little Tokyo at the National Center for the Preservation of Democracy. And you can certainly read what happened there as preserving democracy, and you can also read it as subverting democracy to some extent. But it was an announcement by Governor Gavin Newsom and Democratic leaders in California that they will go forward with a November 4th ballot measure to put new temporary maps in place for congressional districts for the 2026, 28, and 2030 elections. And
But if and
yeah,
only if Texas goes ahead with its redistricting, right?
well, the way Newsom actually phrased it is if or only if any state, any Republican state goes forward with their redistricting. And there are two data points to point out here, which virtually assures that there's going to be a special election. Number one, Ohio is constitutionally obligated under their independent redistricting process to deliver new maps in 2026. And there's a strong likelihood that that will lead to squeezing out a couple Democratic seats there, at least attempting to. Marcy Kaptur in the Toledo area being the most prominent. Number two, there is now reporting that the Texas Democrats who have been staying away, breaking
Right.
quorum, to deny a vote on these new maps in Texas are going to come back. And they're
Right.
going to come back because California has put forward this ballot measure to neutralize or attempt to neutralize, we can talk about that, the effect of what is going to happen in Texas. So there's like a 99.9% chance here
Sure.
that there's going to be this special election, that maps are going to change in Texas, and that the public will have a vote on the changing of maps in California. Now, we haven't seen the maps. We may see them today. Certainly, what Newsom said yesterday is in the coming days. So certainly by Monday, when the California legislature has to begin work on this, I would expect the maps to be out. There is a very short deadline that they have to get this on the ballot for November. Basically, next week, the state legislature comes off their summer recess and comes back into session. And probably by next Friday, they're going to have to pass the series of legislation that both puts this on the ballot and pays for a special election to be held on November 4th, when some local elections are also being held here in California. So that's the deal. And obviously, there were a lot of members of Congress, both senators, several members of the House were there yesterday. Labor leaders who pledged to do whatever it takes, including the California Teachers Union, the SEIU California. David Huerta was at the rally. and the California Labor Federation, led by Lorena Gonzalez. So you can expect a lot of labor money. There's already talk that Kevin McCarthy, of all people, has come back out of the primordial soup to run sort of the Republican campaign. He's expecting to raise as much as $100 million to fight this redistricting effort. So that's at least as much as what's going to be needed on the Democratic side for this effort. And it's called the Election Rigging Response Act. It's weird that you have it's odd to have election rigging in your name as a piece of as a ballot measure, an initiative. But the idea is that these new maps would come in for 3 terms, and that they, well, I mean, we can talk about this. They are intended to offset the 5 seats, Republican seats, that Texas is presuming to give to the Republicans. In reality, I'm not sure that it's going to get us to get Democrats to 5 more Democratic seats in California. There's a lot of shoring up of incumbents in this map.
Well, they're shoring up incumbents whose hold on their district based on how they did in the last election was pretty shaky, like Dave Min in Central Orange County being one.
That's correct. Now, my understanding, and I've talked to members, I talked on the record to Brad Sherman, I've talked to other members of Congress who have seen the maps. The maps are available to the people most interested in them, and that would be members of Congress. And my understanding is this. So Min is one of them, but also George Whitesides, Mike Levin, Josh Harder, in the Central Valley. Those seats are going to be protected. Those seats are going to be much safer, whereas Democrats spent a lot of money trying to get those seats in the past. Other seats like Derek Tran in Orange County is going to be a little, it's not going to be that much safer. They're still going to have to spend money in the Tran seat. Adam Gray in the Central Valley, also, they're still going to have to spend money to protect that seat. There are 3 surefire changes that are Doug LaMalfa and Kevin Kiley, which are in far northern California, as well as Ken Calvert, who now represents this district that's part Riverside County, like the western half, and part the Coachella Valley. Those 3 seats are going to be wiped out. Like Democrats are going to be able to win those seats without much trouble. The difference is that there are going to be 2 seats. David Valadao, who is in a perennially tough district in the Central Valley, and Darrell Issa, who is down in northern San Diego County. Those seats are going to be lean Democrat. They're not going to be slam dunk Democrat. And there's going to be, actual fights there. And Valadao has survived tough races before. And Darrell Issa is, or at least one time was, the richest man in Congress.
Yeah, the wealthy, the marketer of car alarms before anyone.
That's right. His voice is the Viper alarm.
Yes,
it's actually his voice. So that's the landscape. I think the modal outcome is probably Dems +4. On a good night, they could get to +5. On a bad night, they could be +2 if Tran goes down or Adam Gray goes down. And we have a question from Jared. Is Young Kim still around? Yeah, I think what they're going to do is put Young Kim, who's a Republican from sort of the outskirts of Los Angeles County in the Inland Empire. They're going to put Young Kim and Calvert into the same district and make that an ultra red vote sink for Republicans. And it'll be interesting to see who comes out of that. But anyway, the point being, the range is anywhere from +2 to +5, I'd say.
Yeah, and maximally that would offset Texas, but it wouldn't offset the other Republican states that are going to do this. And so you have to look to the other Democratic states, Illinois, New York, maybe New Jersey, where Democrats also would have the power to do this. And so,
and there are a lot of things that are tricky about that. And we can actually start with California. I mean, it's a tricky message and I heard, a lot of members of Congress and the legislature give it their best shot yesterday. But the message is, we all hate gerrymandering, but we have to do it to counteract Donald Trump. I
Yeah,
mean,
and I think Donald Trump is the key here. If it, the
that's
more
right.
it is marketed, not inaccurately, as a
That's right.
counterpunch to Donald Trump's initial punch, we know that this is an anti-Trump state, and there will be a lot of money against it, and some of the formerly moderate Republican goo-goos, as they would be called, good government
Right.
folks, like former Governor Schwarzenegger who was the architect of the jungle primary,
As
will
well as redistricting. That happened
yeah,
under his watch as well.
yeah.
Newsom said that he actually spoke to Schwarzenegger, and I don't know if that means he's neutralized him as far as being outspoken on this or not. But he said he did exchange remarks with him. Um, uh, I think that one of the reasons why this isn't a maximal kind of map, where it's not a 52-0 map, is because you have to go to voters for it. And any kind of weird squiggly line is going to be up on television for the next 3 months. So they did, a little incumbency protection here, and they tried to get to +5. And I think, given what the election is shaping up to be, and especially if the economy takes a bit of a nosedive, I think you could get 5 seats.
Yeah.
And so I think that they had to be a little bit careful to not try to go with a 51-1 map or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's keep in mind that, historically the out party always, makes gains in midterm elections.
Yeah,
And, for all the Democrats floundering, I haven't heard anyone say that Republicans are clearly going to retain control of the House even before the
yeah.
redistricting thing came up. In fact,
Even with
it
that's
was
right,
the fear of losing control of the House that led Trump to tell Texas to go ahead and redraw the lines. And so that's
100%.
still
And
a fact.
several people made that point yesterday,
Yeah.
saying, if I think it was Alex Padilla, the senator from California, who said most normal political parties would run on their record, not try to change the district lines in order to protect power. And I think that's a potent message.
Yeah.
The reality is that even if the most number of Republican states, and you're now talking about Florida, you're talking about Ohio, which has to change their maps, you're talking about Indiana, and Missouri potentially, even if all of them change, I think there is a strong case to be made that Democrats would be favored
Yeah.
in the next election anyway. Obviously, California isn't going to be able to sort of uh, change that situation on its own. They're not going to be able to offset all of the changes that are going to be made around the country, and that's why Newsom sort of said, we need to bring other states into this fight. He urged other governors to get involved. I think Maryland is one where they could potentially get rid of Andy Harris, who's the chair of the Freedom Caucus right
Right.
now, and make a Democratic only map. And I think there are some other states. I mean, Illinois is pretty maxed out.
Right.
Their map is pretty
I think it's
gerrymandered.
14-3 is the
Yeah, and
yeah.
and if you look at it, it's a bizarre map. New York apparently they would need two separate votes, and may not be able to do this before 2028. So Kathy Hochul has talked a good game on this, but it's unclear where how they can truly move forward. And then the other wild card is actually Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, of course, had very gerrymandered maps for Republicans, and a change in the state Supreme Court makeup made it so that some of those could be changed. They changed the state legislature district lines, and had big gains in 2024, but they have thus far not changed the congressional maps there, which is a 6-2 split right now, I believe, even though it's a pretty evenly divided state. So that's
which
another
elects
state.
Democrats statewide, which,
Right.
is
So
an indication of always an indication of gerrymandering if one party wins the statewide votes and gets wiped out in the district votes.
100%. And
Yeah.
so you could see another legal effort there potentially change it. And that's a state with a very late primary. So that could happen, months from now and still be eligible for the 2026 election. There's another side to this, if you want to really talk about the redistricting wars, and that is the fact that this October, the Supreme Court is going to hear oral arguments in a case in Louisiana that is attempting to basically nullify the last vestige of the Voting Rights Act, which is the part that says that you can't racially gerrymander states. Now, this already came into play to give another seat to Democrats, or create another largely black district in Alabama last year, and it also did the same in Louisiana, and that's what's being fought. And the indications by what the fact that the court took the case and how they described taking the case could signal an end to the prohibition that Republicans have, even on the Supreme Court, have long put forward to racial gerrymandering. And if that's so, then you could see a host of states change their maps so that if Voting Rights Act compliance is out the window, then you could see a lot of changes here, frankly. What I'm told is that California is going to comply with the Voting Rights Act in setting their map, and even add 2 new majority minority districts in the map.
Which, honestly, given the demographics of California, where there's a Latino plurality, is not all that hard to do. I would add that the most partisan outcome for the Republicans, and keep in mind that we're not just talking about Alito and Thomas here, that John Roberts
Right.
has been a scourge to the Voting Rights Act in his tenure as Chief Justice. But, if the court strikes down what's left of the Voting Rights Act, usually the really big decisions would come down next June. Well, that's a little too late to affect this year's districting,
Well, but
but
interestingly, that yeah, go ahead.
well, they could, of course, if they're zealously Republican above all else, which we think they are, try to get an earlier ruling on it.
Well, interestingly, they set that particular Louisiana case for the first thing that they're hearing in
Yes, I
October.
think that is
Uh,
the tip off.
Yeah, that is the tip off, and it gives them enough time to make that opinion and give Louisiana a chance to implement that opinion. So, and other states as well. So, yeah, that is the tip off, and it's a very dangerous situation. So, we haven't heard the last of the redistricting wars, but what we do know is that we're going to have an election in almost certainly here in California. And we'll certainly be monitoring that and watching that as the weeks go on. I want to also talk about a thing I wrote this week about the governor's race in California,
Right.
where there's some interesting backstory and history here. So we've had 2, I would say, fairly seismic kind of events in the governor's race that make this particular race unique over the last 20 years and maybe even longer in the state. First, Kamala Harris decided she wasn't going to run for governor. There was a lot of speculation. It kind of froze the field for the governor's race, and she decided against it. Whether she wants to pursue another presidential run or whether she just didn't want to run the state, whatever the reason, she didn't go forward. And the second thing that happened, and this was actually much more surprising and much
Right.
more of a bombshell, is that Eleni Kounalakis, who is the current lieutenant governor of the state of California, who got her start, much like Nancy Pelosi, through fundraising. And her father is a wealthy developer in Sacramento and has given millions and millions and millions of dollars to Democratic causes over the years. And it was seen that Kounalakis, who had the most money cash on hand at the in the most recent reporting cycle, she was the only candidate out there that had the money, connections, what have you, to sort of bring in the political establishment that kind of dictates how campaigns go in the state and has for a long, long time. She was the only figure that would be the heir to the sort of Newsom, Harris, Boxer, Feinstein, Pelosi kind of, and Schiff and Padilla to a certain extent. She was the only one that was positioned to do that, and she dropped out of the race. She dropped out of the race to run for state treasurer, and which was it was very surprising to me that she did this. And she wasn't polling well. She was polling at I think 3% in the
Yeah.
polls. But this was a time when the field was kind of completely frozen because nobody knew what Harris was going to do, and nobody knew where the donors were going to go
Right.
if Harris dropped out.
I,
So
I
yeah, go
would
ahead.
I would add that being a statewide elected official in California, unless you're the governor or one of the senators, is really a path to complete obscurity because no media really has covered Sacramento avidly in years. And if you look at, the Sacramento bureaus of TV stations and major
Yeah,
newspapers to the degree that they even have them, it's a way to fall into a crack. So
yeah,
the case against Delaney Kounalakis and why she probably switched was that A, she can easily win treasurer, but she'd have to overcome her almost universal obscurity. But you're right. She could have, I think, corralled much of the Democratic establishment and spent a gazillion dollars. Uh,
right.
so,
And for
uh,
some reason, she didn't want to do that. You're
right,
absolutely right about the
right,
obscurity issue. I mean, nobody knows who the state controller is, state
right,
treasurer is, or
right,
anything
right.
like that. So what are we left with here? We're left with the establishment not really having a candidate. And when I say establishment, I'm talking about something very specific, and that is the consultants led, in part, maybe to large part, by Ace Smith, who has been the lead consultant for virtually every major statewide candidate in the state for a
And
long time.
he's San Francisco based, as
Right.
it's the core of, the candidates he's promoted from
That's right.
Harris to Newsom to Boxer to Feinstein to
And
Pelosi,
it's the
et
core of
cetera,
the
et cetera,
donor.
et
It's the
cetera.
core of the state donor base. Now,
Yeah.
there's a national donor base that has a lot of Hollywood in it, but if you're talking about statewide races, the Bay Area kind of rules and always has. And this is a California gubernatorial race that only has one candidate from the Bay Area, and he's even more obscure than any of these guys. It's Tony Thurmond, who's the state superintendent for public instruction, the education chief. Nobody else, everybody else is from Southern California. And I can go down who we've got in the
Right.
race. So Katie Porter is now kind of the de facto frontrunner. She leads in all the polls. She ran for Senate and has a national following and reputation based on her 3 terms in Congress. And she did a statewide run for Senate and got some, name recognition there. Antonio Villaraigosa, who was the LA mayor, but not in the last 10 years. He left office, I think, in 2013, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
And he ran for governor in 2018 and lost pretty badly. Uh, Xavier Becerra, who now we go back to real ancient history, ran against Villaraigosa in 2001
I
for LA
covered that.
mayor and got
I covered
nothing, got like
I covered that
6% of the vote.
campaign, and whatever Becerra's virtues, and they certainly exist, he was a really crummy campaigner, and Villaraigosa just cleaned his clock.
Right. And so
Yeah,
he's running, he was the Health and Human Services Secretary, but to Californians, that's just as obscure as being a
yeah,
statewide
sure,
officer.
sure.
He doesn't have a lot of name ID here. Tony Atkins was actually the head at one time of the state Senate and the state assembly in different parts, and has, a lot of developer ties and so has money, but doesn't necessarily have a statewide profile at
Right,
all.
and she's from San
Uh,
Diego.
She's from San Diego. Betty Yee, who has a lot of following among sort of the political junkie class, like
Yeah.
the California Democratic Party executive board would
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
vote for her, but might struggle to get money. She's more progressive, but she might
Right.
struggle to for in the money race and being able to. She was the state controller, another one of these sort of
Right.
memory hole, black hole kind of seats that nobody knows about. And then there's a rich guy. His name is Klubeck. He's like a timeshare guy who he's already spent something like $10 million and nobody knows who he is. So and you know as well as anyone that rich candidates go to die in California where they never seem to do very well.
Yes, I have documented when I was editing the LA Weekly, I documented such efforts. I think I defined where these candidates were headed as, to paraphrase On the Waterfront, as a one-way ticket to Palooka Estates. Uh, they
There
were,
you go. There you go.
yes,
So that's the field, and nobody in that field really screams to me someone that this establishment is going to get behind. Now, it was interesting to me that Barbara Boxer, she's still sort of active in Democratic
sure,
politics, and she was for Eleni Kounalakis before she dropped out. She immediately switched to Via Ragosa,
really,
and that happened this week. And Via Ragosa was way back when he was the California governor. Ace Smith, what actually ran his
right,
LA mayor campaigns.
right,
So well before he was ever running for governor. But Via Ragosa is also, he was very outspoken that he was going to challenge Kamala Harris, who's an Ace Smith protege, on what she knew about Joe Biden if she got into the governor's race. He ran against Newsom in 2018. I think those establishment bonds have been broken and might be generational. Weirdly, Porter has a couple connections here. Nathan Click worked for Newsom, worked for Harris. Porter credits Harris with giving her first job in politics, which was monitoring the foreclosure settlement in 2012. So, I think, but Porter is very much an anti-establishment kind of figure, and there are certainly those who kind of don't like her in the state establishment. So I don't. This is kind of something that we don't see a lot in California, which is democracy, like the ability for a anointed candidate in one of these major races. We
right.
don't see that very often.
No, we don't. Now, I want to dig up some California history for a while. There have been a lot of
Please,
periods in the California Democratic Party universe when there have been rival power centers. Certainly,
right,
Pat Brown had his candidates versus Jess Unruh's candidates back in the 1960s. Moving into starting with the 70s, but really going on from the 80s, 90s, and aughts, you had a more conservative establishment around Tony Coelho, a business-oriented Democrat who would run candidates against the Waxman Berman machine, which tended to be somewhat
right,
more liberal than Coelho's candidates. And so, there's always been establishments. Sometimes they have been rival
right.
establishments within the Democratic Party. But you're right that it has, for peculiar reasons, coalesced around the Bay Area and Ace Smith, and
And this
we'll
is really a Harrison Newsom story. I mean, they're, they would never say it out loud, but they basically divvied up the state.
yes,
That Newsom decided he wanted to stay in the state and become the governor, and Harris decided her best path was not to challenge Newsom and become
but
Senate.
but even before that, you had Feinstein, Pelosi, and Boxer, all
That's
essentially
right,
from San Francisco, uh,
and all
and
contemporaries, and yes,
yeah, yeah, and to a certain degree, that was the legacy of the old Burton machine, Phil Burton, who was
right,
really the leftmost machine California and most of the country has ever seen initially, certainly. and carried
And
on
it's
after that.
funny. It's funny getting back to the redistricting story is that the
Yes.
Berman the Berman Waxman machine and the Burton machine was who drew California politics in that
Right.
era.
Well, this all goes back to the early Vietnam War period, where Waxman and Berman were leading the California Young Democrats, which was the first Democratic group in '65 to oppose the Vietnam War, while Phil Burton was like one of the two or three members of Congress who opposed it. So this was a liaison, and they controlled the redistricting of 1970 and 1980. And Phil Burton famously declared the redistricting of 1980, which was done by Michael Berman, Howard's brother, as my contribution to modern art.
Right,
So
right,
there you
exactly.
go.
But we're in a new frontier. It's going to be a fascinating race because for once, the voters are really going to get a chance to decide, and we just don't see that here. There's no real legacy of retail campaigning. There's no real legacy of this kind of free for all race. The last time I think there really was something like this was when Steve Wesley ran against Phil Angelides in 2006 for the right to lose to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I think that the establishment sat that out because they thought they couldn't win.
And they were
Uh, and they were right. So, I mean, that's how far back we go here. And it's just going to be fascinating. And obviously, we're seeing right now with what Newsom is doing how important the California governor is, especially in this moment of Trump. So it's up for grabs on a seat that really has a lot of power.
absolutely.
Um,
And
okay,
and Trump has really so forced the question that, even if Newsom didn't have presidential aspirations, which he obviously does, he would still, be, given California's politics, be the figure that would be leading this kind of pushback nationally.
okay. We are just about out of time, but I have a quick question here from the audience from Chris Pantocrator. And this is for you, Harold.
Uh-oh.
He says, "Hi, all, for Harold. With all respect, have you seen anything recently from the DSA that would make you consider rejoining? Thanks. Love you guys and have a great weekend." Now, we just ran a piece that you once also edited from Emma Jansen, who was at the DSA convention that happened to be in Chicago last week. And so you've seen a little bit more up close what's been going on in that organization, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, if I were a member of New York DSA, I would be obviously, even if I weren't, I'd obviously be going all out for Zoran Mandami and AOC. But, the more sectarian folks within DSA essentially passed a resolution which said that anyone who believes that Israel should have a right to defend itself can be expelled from the organization. Now, that actually includes AOC, who was not endorsed for re-election by the National Political Committee, but was endorsed by the New York local. And if Bernie Sanders were a member, it would include Bernie Sanders, even though Bernie Sanders and AOC have led the fight to stop all offensive arms sales and shipments
Mhm.
to Israel. So, that I don't know that I would, if I rejoined, I could be expelled. And frankly, I think even the more sectarian groups think that probably Zoran Mandami agrees with AOC and Bernie on this, but he's engendered such enthusiasm that they're not going to touch it. So I think the answer is not at this time, but there is obviously a lot of positive energy and positive work going on in DSC that kind of isn't, the left hand isn't, deliberately, the left hand and right hand aren't paying attention to the other in terms of whether it's a mandate or not.
I think it's that work that's what's interesting to me.
Yeah.
That I mean, there is no question that DSA played a foundational role
Yeah.
in the large volunteer base that really helped drive Mamdani to victory
Yeah,
in the primary.
absolutely.
And we've seen that energy in other areas around the country. There are other DSA members in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and
In the
in
LA City
other
Council districts.
the LA City Council districts, where that kind of energy, that kind of real on the ground work has proven successful. And I think it's very interesting in that sense. And obviously, when you get to the national political committee, you get a lot more factional politics.
Yeah, yeah.
But there is some interesting work going on there.
Yeah,
All right.
the theory and practice often have little
Yes.
to do with each other.
Indeed. Harold, thank you very much, as always, for being here. As I mentioned at the top, we do this every Friday afternoon at 12:30 Eastern. We will put this on the website. You'll be able to watch it, tell your friends, and visit prospect.org and tell them about this conversation. Thank you very much for being here, and we'll be back next Friday. So we hope you can join us. Bye bye.